Stephanie White, you're not about to sit here and throw Caitlin Clark under the bus. Yeah, she missed the free throws. She definitely missed the free throws, but we're not about to sit here and act like your ass didn't sit on the bench and watch them Jackie Young go on a 17-0 run by herself. You ain't calling a timeout or nothing.
A 17-0 run, Jackie Young by herself, while Stephanie White sat on that bench and watched it happen without calling a single timeout, without drawing up a single play, without making a single adjustment for the player who was single-handedly dismantling her team's lead in real time. And then, when it was over, when the game was lost, when the cameras turned to the post-game podium, Stephanie White opened her mouth and blamed Caitlin Clark.
Stephanie White took to the podium, and Stephanie White is trying to cast all of the blame for the loss on Caitlin Clark. All of the blame for the loss on Caitlin Clark. Nasty work from a head coach. She's not a leader.
All of it. Every ounce of responsibility for a loss that had coaching fingerprints all over it. The defensive substitution that put on Jackie Young instead of Lexi Hall. The 17-0 run without a timeout. The 22 turnovers that came in part because the team had no offensive structure to rely on when the game got difficult. All of it pointed directly at Clark. Caitlin Clark is pissed. The internet is done. And the Indiana Fever front office is running out of time to pretend this coaching staff is salvageable. There is a specific kind of institutional cowardice that exists in professional sports coaching, the kind that waits until the cameras are on, until the reporters are assembled, until the post-game podium provides the perfect platform, and then uses that platform to redirect accountability away from the coaching staff and onto the player who was out there doing everything asked of her while the coaching staff failed to do its job, has been demonstrating that cowardice all season. But what happened after the Las Vegas Aces game, what she said at that podium, what she refused to say, and what Caitlin Clark is now reportedly furious about is the most naked, most documented, most indefensible example of it yet. But what really started all of this is not what fans think. To understand why Caitlin Clark's reported fury at his post-game press conference is not just justified but overdue, you have to reconstruct what actually happened in this game. Not the final score, not the turnover total, the specific sequence of coaching decisions that set the conditions for the loss before Clark missed a single free throw. Because the story told at the podium turnovers, missed free throws, players not coming up with loose balls is technically accurate in its individual details. Clark did turn the ball over. The free throws were missed. The loose ball did not go their way. But the story White told omits the coaching decisions that made all of those individual failures catastrophic instead of manageable. And that omission is where the accountability conversation has to start.
Were you not the coach who was sitting on the bench watching Jackie Young score bucket after bucket after bucket after bucket in the last 4 minutes of the second quarter on Kelsey Mitchell? While after you sent your best defender in Lexi Hall to the bench? Were you not the coach during that? Were you not the coach?
Were you not the coach? That is the question, the specific, documented, basketball-precise question that the post-game press conference accountability conversation has to answer before any discussion of turnovers or missed free throws can be taken seriously. And because here is what the game film shows. Was guarding. Jackie Young had 0 points while Hall was on her. 0. The defensive assignment was working. The game plan was producing the result that defensive game plans are supposed to produce. And then made a substitution. She pulled L, the defender who had Young completely neutralized, and put LL on her instead. Immediately went on a record run by herself, while the coaching staff that made the substitution watched from the bench without calling a timeout.
This girl just keeps blaming Caitlin Clark. Dude, you took out Lexi Hall, who was guarding Jackie Young, and Jackie Young had 0 points. You took Lexi Hall out, put Kelsey Mitchell on Jackie Young, and Jackie Young start tearing her ass up. What are you talking about?
0 points. Hall was guarding Young. 0 points. The substitution was made. Young immediately went on a record run. That is not a player accountability moment. That is a coaching accountability moment. One of the most direct, most documented, most statistically unambiguous coaching accountability moments in the Indiana Fever's recent history. A defensive substitution that neutralized the opponent's most dangerous offensive player, followed immediately by a coaching decision to pull that defensive assignment, followed immediately by a record offensive run from the player who had just been neutralized. The coaching decision caused the run caused the deficit, and the coaching staff that caused the run then stood at the podium and blamed the turnovers. And during that run, while Jackie Young was systematically dismantling the Indiana Fever's lead with Kelsey Mitchell unable to contain her, what did do?
This lady sat on the bench and watched them go on a run and didn't call a single timeout She's a bum. I told y'all this lady should have been fired before this season even started.
Not a single timeout during a record run with Caitlin Clark and on the floor. 3 players whose individual and collective talent properly deployed through a well-timed timeout, a drawn-up play, a defensive adjustment is more than capable of stopping any run in this league. But the timeout was not called. The play was not drawn up. The adjustment was not made. And when a reporter later asked what adjustments she could have made, what specifically, as a head coach with access to timeouts and drawn plays and the entire strategic infrastructure of a professional basketball coaching staff, she could have done differently. The answer she gave tells you everything you need to know about this coaching staff's relationship with accountability.
It's tough to make adjustments when you're getting turnovers for touchdowns.
It is tough to make adjustments when you are getting turnovers for touchdowns. A reporter asked what adjustments she could have made, and S answer delivered at a professional post-game press conference in front of the media in response to a direct accountability question was essentially, the turnovers made it impossible for me to do my job. That is not an answer. That is a deflection disguised as an answer. That is a head coach using turnover statistics to explain away the absence of coaching, as though timeouts are only available when the team is playing perfectly, as though defensive adjustments can only be made in games where nothing goes wrong, as though the entire value of having a coaching staff is contingent on the players not making mistakes. Players make mistakes. That is why coaching staffs exist, to manage the mistakes, to limit their damage, to call timeouts when runs start, make defensive adjustments when opponents find their rhythm, and draw up plays that give talented players the structure they need to execute under pressure. Did none of those things against Las Vegas. And then she walked to the podium and blamed Clark. Let us be precise about what actually said at that podium, because the specific language matters, because the specific deflections she chose, which parts of the loss she was willing to address, and which parts she was not, revealed a coaching philosophy that has defined her entire tenure with the Indiana Fever. She talked about turnovers, 22 turnovers that gave Las Vegas 18 points, a legitimate tactical problem that any honest post-game analysis has to address. She talked about players missing free throws, also legitimate. Players missed free throws. That contributed to the loss. She talked about loose balls not going their way, the 50-50 ball at the end of regulation, the timing, the veterans on the other side.
Blame the player. Oh, we got to get the loose ball. Oh, we got to get the ball. We got to... Never blames herself at all. She's not responsible for any of this. Brianne January, responsible for none of this. Austin Kelly, responsible for none of this. None of the coaching is involved. It's just all on a player.
None of the coaching is involved. That is the framing offered at the post-game podium, and it is a framing that the game film, the substitution record, and the timeout log directly contradict. The coaching was involved. The coaching was central. The coaching decision to pull the defender who had at 0 points was the decision that created the conditions for the record run. The coaching decision not to call a timeout during that record run was the decision that allowed it to become catastrophic. The absence of a drawn-up offensive play in a critical possession was the coaching failure that left 3 of the most talented offensive players in the league improvising in a moment that required structure. And not one word of any of that appeared in ES post-game press conference.
At no point does she say, hey, I need to have my players better prepared. Hey, I should have got us together in a timeout and put something together for us offensively. Hey, I should have made some adjustments on Jackie defensively from a coaching perspective. Never does she take accountability and look in the mirror and see what she could have done.
Never, not once, in an entire post-game press conference about a game that had coaching fingerprints all over its most critical moments, the Hall substitution, the timeout silence during the run, the absence of late-game structure, did not once acknowledge that the coaching staff could have done something differently. That is not an oversight. That is a pattern. The same pattern that has defined every post-game press conference where something went wrong this season. The turnovers are the player's fault. The missed free throws are the player's fault. The loose balls are the player's fault. The record runs that happened while the coaching staff sat on the bench without calling timeouts are the players' fault because they were turning the ball over. Everything is the player's fault. Nothing is the coaching staff's fault. And the player whose name appears most consistently in the deflections, the player who gets blamed most specifically, most visibly, most publicly is Caitlin Clark.
All she does is cast the blame on somebody else, preferably Caitlin Clark, every single time. This lady takes no accountability. She wants no responsibility for any failures.
Preferably Caitlin Clark, every single time. That is the documented pattern. And it is a pattern that Caitlin Clark has now been navigating for an entire season. Every loss that has a coaching explanation gets a player explanation at the podium. Every coaching failure that has a specific basketball precise cause gets absorbed into references to turnovers and missed free throws that point back to the roster rather than the staff. And the player at the center of every one of those redirections is Clark, who reportedly walked out of this post-game press conference coverage absolutely furious. Not at the loss, not at her own turnovers. She knows she turned the ball over too many times, and she owns that. At the public, deliberate, documented choice to use a professional press conference as a tool for redirecting accountability away from the coaching staff and onto the player who has been carrying this franchise all season. In the middle of a post-game press conference that was rapidly becoming a masterclass in accountability avoidance, something unusual happened. A reporter from Indianapolis, by the specific acknowledgement in the transcript, asked the question that every reporter in that room should have been asking from the beginning. Not about the turnovers, not about the missed free throws, about the coaching. What adjustments could you have made?
You talked about with Jackie Young as a league record. In that thought process, what adjustments could have, or what adjustments were made?
Yeah, let's go. What adjustment could you have made?
Or made in regards to the thought process, and what did you learn about your team's identity tonight?
League record run. What adjustments could you have made? That is the accountability question. The specific basketball precise accountability question that a head coach has to be able to answer when her team allows a league record run in the final minutes of a half a run that directly followed a defensive substitution she made, during which she called no timeouts that reversed a lead the team had worked to build. The answer Stephanie White gave to that question is the moment that crystallized everything that has been wrong with this coaching staff all season.
It's tough to make adjustments when you're getting turnovers for touchdowns, so to speak. So just really talking about taking care of the ball. When that happened, we got away from our pace.
Turnovers for touchdowns. That is the answer to a question about what adjustments the coaching staff could have made during a league record run. A question that had a specific, documentable answer, call a timeout, put Hall back on Young, draw up an offensive possession, do literally anything with the coaching resources that a professional basketball coaching staff has access to. And the answer delivered was the turnovers made it hard.
There's one reporter that actually put her to the test and said, "What could you have done?" And she spun it right back to the players. Nothing to do with her. This is freaking disgusting, man.
Spun it right back to the players. That is the specific technique, and recognizing it as a technique rather than a genuine post-game analysis is essential to understanding why Caitlin Clark is reportedly furious. Because Clark is a basketball player at the highest level of the sport. She understands what turnovers do to a game. She understands what missed free throws cost. She owns her individual failures she always has, with the kind of honest self-assessment that actually good players bring to their performance evaluation. What she does not own, what she has never owned, and what the game film confirms she should not own is a coaching staff's decision to pull the defender who was working, to watch a record run from the bench without calling a timeout, and to then stand at the podium and use the turnover statistics to explain away the absence of coaching. That is not player accountability. Every player in that locker room is watching. Every player who turned the ball over, missed a free throw, failed to come up with a loose ball, is watching their head coach go to the podium, and he essentially confirmed that the coaching staff bears no responsibility for a loss that the coaching staff's decisions materially contributed to.
Players already hate that they miss free throws, right? Hate that they miss plays. Like that's, you just got to try to keep them positive, in those moments.
Keep them positive. That is what Stephanie White said coaches should do when players miss free throws and lose plays. Keep them positive in those moments. And then she walked to the podium and publicly, on record in front of the assembled media, directed the narrative of the loss toward the turnovers and the missed free throws toward the player failures, while the coaching failures went unacknowledged. That is not keeping them positive. That is the opposite of keeping them positive. That is using the post-game press conference as a platform to publicly document player failures while privately absorbing coaching failures. And every player in that locker room, not just Clark, heard exactly what was being communicated. Here is where the full picture comes into focus, and it is a picture that the Indiana Fever front office can no longer look at honestly and remain comfortable that she does not have the accountability infrastructure that professional basketball coaching requires. Not the defensive scheme accountability, not the rotation accountability, not the post-game communication accountability. And the player who has been most consistently on the receiving end of that accountability vacuum is the most important player in the franchise's history.
Make no mistake about it, Caitlin Clark needed to make those free throws. Caitlin Clark turned the ball over too much. Kelsey Mitchell needed to make that free throw. Aaliyah Boston, you the one that got Aaliyah Boston standing at the three-point line all damn game. You the one that got her doing that. But it's not because of your coaching at all, right? You just blame everything on Caitlin Clark.
You the one that got Aaliyah Boston standing at the three-point line all damn game. That is the coaching accountability that the podium language carefully avoided. Because it is not just the Hall substitution and the timeout silence that belong in the coaching accountability conversation. It is the offensive system decisions that have been placing players in positions that do not reflect their strengths all season. Boston at the three-point line, the offensive hub running through players other than Clark, the rotation decisions that interrupt Clark's rhythm at precisely the moments her shooting has reached its peak. All of it is coaching. All of it has a documented game film impact on the team's performance. And none of it has ever appeared in a Stephanie White post-game press conference as something the coaching staff needs to own.
You don't have a single play that you can draw up when you got Caitlin Clark, Kelsey Mitchell, and Aaliyah Boston on the floor to get you a basket. We're not about to act like you are clear of blame. This is your problem. You never want to take accountability.
Not a single play. With Clark, Mitchell, and Boston on the floor, three of the most talented offensive players in the WNBA, any one of whom, properly utilized in a drawn-up play during a critical possession, is more than capable of generating the basket a team needs to stop a run or close a game. And the coaching staff that has all three of them on its roster could not produce a single drawn-up play in the moments the game required one. That is the coaching accountability conversation. That is what was missing from the podium. And that is what Caitlin Clark, who was out on that floor doing everything in her power with the talent and preparation she brings to every game, is reportedly furious about. Not the loss. Losses happen, not her turnovers. She owns those. The public blame, the deliberate, documented, professional press conference redirect that put the coaching staff's failures on her shoulders while the coaching staff walked away clean. The Indiana Fever front office is now operating with zero credibility on the question of whether Stephanie White is the right coach for this team and this moment, because the evidence accumulated across an entire season of rotation decisions, press conference language, organizational communication choices, and now a post-game blame session that the basketball world watched in real-time points in one direction. This coaching relationship is broken. The player is pissed. The fan base is done. And the front office that hired this coach with full awareness of the history, with full awareness of what Sophie Cunningham and others were already saying about the institutional environment around Clark, has to answer for what that hire has produced.
Fire this bum, this bozo of a coach. Get down in the comments. Let me know what y'all think, man. This
Make me want to throw up. That is the visceral, unfiltered reaction from a commentator who has been watching this situation all season, who has documented the pattern, who has watched the rotation decisions and the press conference language and the organizational communication choices build toward exactly the kind of post-game blame session that happened after the Las Vegas Aces game. And that reaction is not an overreaction. It is the appropriate response to a head coach who used a professional press conference to publicly redirect accountability for a loss that had coaching fingerprints all over its most critical moments onto the player who has been carrying this franchise all season. Here is where everything lands. That is what elite competitors do. They own their individual failures without being defensive about them. What she does not own is Lexi Hall being pulled off when Young had 0 points. She does not own the timeout that was not called during a league record run. She does not own the absence of a drawn-up play in a critical possession with 3 elite offensive players on the floor. She does not own Aaliyah Boston standing at the three-point line for 40 minutes because the offensive system placed her there. Those belong to the coaching staff, too, to Brienne January, to Austin Kelly, to the entire coaching infrastructure that sat on that bench, watched the game deteriorate, and then walked to the podium and pointed at Clark.
See, this is what we not doing. This is what we not doing, Stephanie White. You're not about to sit here and throw Caitlin Clark under the bus.
This is what we not doing. That is the line that the fan base, the commentary community, and reportedly Caitlin Clark herself have drawn after a post-game press conference that represents the most public, most documented, most indefensible example of accountability avoidance this coaching staff has produced. The Indiana Fever front office has to decide today, with urgency, whether the coach who sat on the bench during a league record run without calling a timeout out and then blame the turnovers is the coach they want standing at the podium representing their franchise. Whether the coach who consistently, publicly, documentably redirects accountability away from the coaching staff and onto the players, preferably, Clark is the coach they want, managing the most important player in the history of their organization. Whether the coach who has spent an entire season building the case for Clark's departure, one press conference at a time, is the coach they can afford to keep when the clock on Clark's organizational loyalty is already running. Stephanie White sat on that bench, scored 17 straight, no timeout, no adjustment, no drawn-up play, no accountability, and then she walked to the podium and blamed Caitlin Clark. Caitlin Clark is pissed. The fan base is done. The front office is out of time, and who has spent an entire season demonstrating that the word accountability does not apply to the coaching staff, only to the players, is running out of games to hide behind the turnovers. Fire the coach. Save the franchise before Clark makes the decision for them.